Two games played this past weekend, and we'll give you our takeaways from Miami's win over the Hawks and their disappointing loss to the Sixers. Plus, Nostradumwes offers his predictions for the week, plus the latest roster changes for the Heat. Kicking off your week with a great show you don't want to miss.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Heat Nation. It's a Monday edition of Locked On Heat, your daily podcast covering all things Miami Heat. However, you may be listening on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app. Thank you so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I am David Ramil, and with me, as always, from the remote location, looks like he's broadcasting from Hawaii or maybe somewhere nearby, is my co-host Wes Goldberg. It's a great show to kick off the week with Nostradumwes making his return and offering his predictions for the week's games. Monday Madness in our last segment, much more. But we'll start off today's show talking about this weekend's games. Rather than give you a full recap or full breakdown or anything like that, we'll just be giving you our takeaways that paint a picture of what happened to Miami this weekend. On Friday night, Jimmy Butler returned to the lineup after missing the previous 3 games with an ankle injury. The Heat were taking on the Hawks for the second time in 3 games, and they came out with a 124-118 victory led by Tyler Herro's 24 points. On Saturday, the Heat hosted the Philadelphia 76ers. Joel Embiid listed as questionable before the game, and then it was announced an hour before tip-off that he would play. Started off slowly and eventually returned to his MVP form, and led the Sixers with 32 points in a 109-98 loss for the Heat. Let's start off with you, Wes. What's one of your takeaways from the past games?
Well, my first takeaway from the end of that Atlanta game is a couple different things. Number one, we saw Miami going into a hammer lineup, which is something that you, I, and Rohan talked about in our Friday episode. We did like a mid-season big questions facing the Miami Heat for the second part of the season. We were wondering, what is Miami's hammer lineup? What is their version of the death lineup? What is it that they go to when they really need to get a bucket, when they really need to get a couple of stops in a row? And we saw it. And look, we could keep talking about this, but in that game where they had Jimmy Butler, but they did not have Bam Adebayo, obviously, they go with Kyle Lowry, Tyler Herro, Caleb Martin, Jimmy Butler, PJ Tucker. Tucker ostensibly playing center in that lineup, and it worked. And so that was my first takeaway was, all right, like when Erik Spoelstra is really kind of put into a corner here, who are the 5 guys he wants on the court that he has available to him? And it was those 5 guys. And like I said, it works. It works because Jimmy Butler at the end of the game, they go spread, pick, and roll. They just sort of spread out the entire floor. They get Jimmy Butler in isolation. And what does he do? He just does one of the – I think it's just Jimmy and maybe LeBron James, the 2 guys in the NBA. Maybe you could think of somebody else who can make the kind of play that he made. But to get to the basket, finish through – take the contact, finish through contact, and then make a layup with touch.
Yeah.
And to call it a layup is almost selling it short. It was like this weird, like he had to put spin on it, kind of floater, underhand floater thing, like 2 or 3 feet away from the basket. Only he can make that. I think only he and LeBron James can make that sort of play. Yeah. And those were my kind of takeaways from the Atlanta game is, okay, here's where Erik Spoelstra is when he's in a pinch. And then here's the reason why you want a guy like Jimmy Butler on your team. Because I know that the Heat have been playing well up until that point. We've talked about it a bunch, 3-point shooting and all this other stuff that they've been doing, but no offense to Max Strus, but he ain't doing that. No offense to Gabe Vincent, but he ain't doing that. Jimmy Butler's doing that. And when you need a bucket, you go to Jimmy Buckets, and that's what he did. It was a phenomenal play, a great adjustment by Spoelstra at the end of that game. And then as far as the Philadelphia game, I really don't have much from that. I don't know about you, but like the Heat just couldn't make a shot. You're going to get some of those games. You're going to get the games where you're shooting 50% from the field like the Heat have had, on a couple different occasions. And you're going to get games like that you did against Philly. Nobody's going to be able to buy a bucket. That's to me what that game down to. I'm not drawing too many conclusions from that one, but I thought it was interesting what they did at the end of the game against Atlanta.
As far as that hammer lineup is concerned, and you brought up a good point about how it's going to be. Well, I mean, it's without Bam Adebayo, so clearly he's going to be into the game. So who gets substituted out? And obviously, the ideal choice seems like it would be Caleb Martin, or the most likely choice. But I think he's making a strong case for himself, not just because of his offensive abilities, the fact that he can space the floor, that he can create his own shot as well, that he's shown some playmaking ability here and there. I think you probably take PJ Tucker out of that lineup. But of course, we have no idea what's going to happen with Victor Oladipo. But could you see a lineup where it's Bam in there and Caleb instead of PJ Tucker, and PJ Tucker just isn't in that starting five or closing five lineup?
I wrote about this on my Substack this morning, and I really do think that you kind of have to take PJ Tucker out.
Yeah.
I don't think there's an ideal person to take out of that lineup, right? You have to
They all have
Bam.
their
Number
strengths.
one, let's start there. You have to have Bam in there. You have to.
Fair.
He's one of your best two players. You can't not have your hammer lineup not include one of your two best players. Caleb Martin does so much for them offensively as far as his energy. He's spacing the floor, shooting 37% from three this year, doing all these things. He can attack off the dribble a little bit more than I think PJ Tucker can. PJ Tucker is, we keep talking about how, he was the zero on offense in Milwaukee and now he's not in Miami, but he really is kind of limited to the corner and the baseline in Miami even still. Caleb Martin can do stuff from all over the court. And he's a better on-ball defender. I don't know that than people give him credit for. I don't know that he's better necessarily than PJ Tucker, but the Heat have put him in those situations. They're putting Caleb Martin on Steph Curry and Damian Lillard and De'Aaron Fox and Chris Paul, not PJ Tucker. And there's a lot of different reasons that go into that, but that's what they're doing with Caleb Martin. And I think you can put Bam Adebayo in there. You maintain a fair amount of size, more size than you would with PJ Tucker. He's not the floor spacer from the corners that PJ Tucker is in, but he's, I think, more dynamic offensively than PJ Tucker is. Mm-hmm. I think you kind of have to take PJ out and keep Caleb Martin in. And that's strange to think about it that way. But if you're talking about a hammer lineup where you want to switch everything, space the floor, play fast, do all these things, I mean, if you just have Bam and PJ in there with Tyler, Kyle, and Jimmy, that's essentially your starting lineup with Tyler Herro in place of Duncan Robinson or Max Strus. But if you really want a different kind of lineup, and a hammer lineup is also sort of a change of pace lineup, I think you get more of that. You accomplish more of that with Caleb Martin in there, who plays fast, plays with energy, and all that stuff that we keep talking about him about. That really kind of accomplishes what I think you're trying to accomplish in a hammer lineup. So I'm with you. Yeah. I think it's Caleb Martin that ends up in there, which is crazy because he's on a two-way contract.
Well, yeah. So for now, anyway. But that kind of takes me to my takeaways as far as the Sixers games are concerned. I have to say, PJ Tucker was quietly bad, not just offensively though. He had 10 points, so he contributed well. I think defensively, he got exposed a little bit by Tobias Harris, who had 22 points and was a big, he stepped up big time when Joel Embiid wasn't playing his best early in that first half. Of course, most of Embiid's points coming in the second half. Tobias Harris contributing, knocking shots from the perimeter and the mid-range, doing a great job. And a lot of that was at Tucker's expense. So I hate bagging on Tucker because I think he's been so great all year, and I've been pretty consistent in saying that. At the same time, there are certain lineups where I don't think he's ready to meet that challenge defensively. However, I do have some player who I'm starting to turn a little bit regarding his ability to become part of the starting lineup, and that's Omer Yurtseven. I'm getting dangerously close, Wes, to saying that I can see lineups with Yurtseven and Bam out on the floor. And I know it's going to kill their spacing. I know it could be problematic. I think you can still have Bam operating from the elbow and just have Yurtseven out there for his rebounding in the paint area because he's shown enough touch there. Did a pretty good job in Embiid most of all. I think most of Embiid's points came later on when Yurtseven sat in the second half just to get himself some rest at Dwayne Dedman's expense. I could see it. I don't know, man. It's like maybe I'm just making too much of it. I'm not that kind of guy normally, but Yurtseven's strong performance against Embiid, and I'm starting to think that there might be some lineups where he could possibly thrive in there as a starter.
I think it would be matchup dependent, but I don't really see any matchups where Miami would need two bigs on the floor at any one time. But as far as
the Cavs is one of those teams, right? That everybody keeps asking, how does Miami match up? Because Miami's been beaten up twice when you got Jared Allen and everybody else in the Evan Mobley, etc.
I think against the Cavs, you would start with PJ Tucker, but maybe to your point, you end up at a point if you're down by 10 or 12 points, you put Yurtseven and Bam out. I'm not firmly against it. I think that with Yurtseven, my big take, the way that he was able to play in that first quarter against Philadelphia and what he's been able to do, what is it now? 14 straight games with double-digit rebounds. That's the most since a rookie since Karl-Anthony Towns in 2016. That's a significant stat. Yeah. And he's just so productive. And the thing is that he makes himself available, which is my favorite thing about him. So many times against Atlanta, and I thought it was even more apparent against Philadelphia, where he is just, and again, I wrote about this on my Substack this morning, and I have some film with it, but the way that he cuts on those pick and rolls, cuts off the ball, and things like that is a really understated part of his game. He is big, but he makes himself big. He makes himself available. He's got his hands up all the time. He's rolling to the basket. There's a reason why he's finishing alley-oops like all the time.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just hey, be tall, jump high, dunk. Like there's a
That
homework
helps.
that you have to do beforehand. Yeah, it helps. But there's homework that you have to do beforehand as far as setting the right screen, making the timing on the cut the right timing, and all this stuff. And he does that. He's gotten so much better at it too over the last month or so since he's been really getting these rotation minutes.
Of course.
He's made a real case to be a part of the rotation, a regular part of the rotation, and I think maybe the second string center and taking Dwayne Dedmon's spot in that role, because you look at the ratings for the Heat, their on-off stats. Offensively, they're slightly better with Yurtseven in the game than Dwayne Dedmon. Defensively, they're slightly better with Dwayne Dedmon in the game than Yurtseven. But then you kind of consider how much better Yurtseven has gotten defensively since he's really been getting this heavy dose of minutes. And I think by the end of the season, you can make a real case that, hey, maybe by the end, like at the very least, they'd be neutral defensively. And I don't think there's any doubt that offensively, Yurtseven is much more skilled than Dwayne Dedmon. And so, maybe there's, in the name of development and just what he's been able to do production-wise, maybe Yurtseven is the second string center for this group right now, and it's not Dwayne Dedmon.
Totally see it. No, I could totally see it. Look, I mean, with Bam's imminent return, he should be playing Monday against the Toronto Raptors. I have legitimate concerns about Miami's ability to rebound the ball, because it just seems like there are times when it's Yurtseven's ball and nobody else is available to grab that board for Miami. So I wonder whether or not there's a significant drop-off. Of course, there will be improvement in other areas because of Bam's incredible defensive versatility. But aside from that, in terms of rebounding, we saw early in the season how much of Miami's offense thrived on that fast outlet because they grabbed rebounds. They were out rebounding every team and being able to initiate their fast break offense. I wonder whether or not we'll start to see an evolution in the offense that we've seen over the last few weeks with Yurtseven in the starting lineup. One last takeaway, something I'll expound upon a little bit further on in the show. Jimmy Butler, not Duncan Robinson. Jimmy Butler was the team's worst player on Saturday. I know that kind of sounds blasphemous after a strong performance against the Hawks on Friday, but he was bad. Those were shots that were absolutely makeable for him. I know there's I'll get into it later on, because I think that's something worth saving when you're looking at, where you lay the blame for Saturday's loss. And I know a lot of Heat fans want to do so.
A Monday Madness tease, maybe?
Hey, that's all I'm saying. Perhaps. Absolutely. We'll see what happens. But you know what? Let's move on. We'll get into Nostradumwes' predictions in the next segment, of course. And then I want to tell you a little bit about one of our sponsors for the show. It's Shopify. Shopify gives entrepreneurs the resources once reserved for big businesses, so upstarts, startups, and established businesses alike can sell everywhere, synchronize online and in-person sales, and effortlessly stay informed. Scaling your business is a journey of endless possibility. And you know what? Shopify makes all that so much easier. Shopify powers millions of businesses from first sale to full scale. So if you can want to reach customers online and across social networks with an ever-growing suite of channel integrations and apps that include Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, and more, if you want to gain insights as you grow with detailed reporting of conversion rates, profit margins, and beyond, if you want something that's more than a store, then Shopify is the answer for you, because Shopify grows with you. This is possibility powered by Shopify. Go to shopify.com/LockedOnNBA. That's all lowercase. Shopify.com/LockedOnNBA for a free 14-day trial and get full access to Shopify's entire suite of features. Grow your business with Shopify today. Go to Shopify.com/LockedOnNBA right now.
All right, it is time to make some predictions for this week in Miami Heat basketball. It is time for Nostradumwes. No hat today because I forgot it. Okay. So that's what happens. Sorry for people watching on YouTube. But let's quickly review how Nostradumwes did last week. And David, it was a good week for Nostradumwes. Wednesday in Atlanta, Nostradumwes predicts that Max Strus would start in that game. Max Strus did start in that game, and in fact started in every game after that. Put a pin in that. Remember that. That might have to do with one of the predictions coming up here. Friday in Atlanta, or at home against Atlanta, Nostradumwes predicts that it's a big game for Jimmy Butler. Well, Jimmy Butler in that game, 23 points, 10 assists, 3 rebounds, 2 steals, a team high, plus 19. That was the game where Tyler Herro got a lot of the headlines, and rightly so, for his double-double and what he was able to do off the bench and late in that game. But it was a big game for Jimmy Butler. And then Saturday against Philadelphia, Nostradumwes predicting that Yurt's season might be over. Now, Omer Yurtseven had a great game. He was outplayed by Joel Embiid, but most centers are. But he had a great game. But it was still the end of your season because Bam Adebayo is coming back, and that was the last game that
Wow.
he's going to start probably for the foreseeable future. And so I think it was a perfect 3-0 for Nostradumwes.
I think you lost your hat reaching for that last one, buddy. I'm telling you. I don't know.
So let's look ahead to this week. We have tonight versus Toronto. Of course, we know that Bam Adebayo is going to be back in the lineup. We presume that he's probably going to start also in his first game back.
Yep.
But I don't think that's going to be the only change to the starting lineup. I think we have the return of Duncan Robinson to the starting lineup tonight against the Raptors. And I think a lot of Heat fans will be like, well, why? He was awful against Philadelphia, and he was. But so was everybody. And I do think that there's a delicate balance that Eric Spoelstra has to find with Duncan Robinson as far as, all right, I don't know that Max Strus was always the starter. Like, I don't think he was the starter in perpetuity. Eric Spoelstra, time and time again, when asked about it, would say, hey, look, it's a day-to-day thing. We're trying to carry over some momentum. Well, you know what kills momentum? Losing to Philadelphia the way that you did. So whatever momentum that you were trying to maintain doesn't exist anymore. And I think with Bam Adebayo coming back, I think you want to create a lineup that has some familiarity. And then the chemistry that Bam Adebayo and Duncan Robinson have is very real. And I don't know that exists between Bam Adebayo and Max Strus. Now, there's chemistry between Max Strus and Jimmy Butler. But Jimmy Butler is going to get his, and he's going to get guys involved regardless of who's on the floor. But I think the Bam and Duncan connection is a very real one. And I think it makes a lot of sense right now. And I think as far as trying to sort of massage the Duncan Robinson mini slump that he's in right now, making 3 of his last 20 3-pointers, he's again in this little mini slump. I think it would say a lot for Eric Spoelstra to be like, you know what? I don't care about this. You're getting the right shots. I trust you. You're back in the starting lineup. I'm not going to punish you for something in a make or miss league. I'm going to put you back in the starting lineup, and we're going to restore our original starting lineup of Bam, PJ, Jimmy, Kyle, and Duncan Robinson. So I think Duncan Robinson starts against the Raptors tonight.
I talked to Max on Friday before the game during shoot around that morning, and I asked him about his starting role, and he explained basically that kind of in line with what you were saying, that he just feels like he adds something different to that starting lineup, especially without Bam Adebayo out there. So I think you're spot on as far as Bam's return. Now you bring back a guy who's much more specialized perhaps in what he can do in terms of his three-point shooting. And yes, maybe that three-point shooting hasn't been falling, but I think when you see his tag team partner out there in Bam, I think you'll start to see that connection perhaps a little bit more strong than it was before. I'm curious. I think there's a strong argument to be made with Max continuing to start, and I think you could equally argue, as you just did, that Duncan should be the starter. But I am inclined to agree with you there in terms of Duncan returning to the starting lineup, and we'll see whether or not Max it stays there as far as in the backup role there. But it should be interesting. It's a good call on your part there. Let's move on then.
Yeah, sure. Wednesday against the Trailblazers, another home game. I think that the Heat, listen, they scored their season high. Do you remember what their season high was?
I do not know. Off the top of my head, no.
137 points on opening night versus Milwaukee. They scored their season high in their first game of the season. And they haven't eclipsed 130. They scored at 124, 125, here and there. I've been predicting season highs a couple different times, but I'm pretty sure this time, David, Wednesday night against the Trailblazers defense is awful. I mean, it's barely even there. It barely exists. And I think with the full starting lineup back, with Bam, Jimmy back in the lineup, I could see them crushing Portland, especially in the paint, getting a bunch of easy baskets. I think the Heat set a new season high in points tonight. Again, Miami's season high was 137. So what I am saying is I think they score more than 137 points Wednesday against Portland. And I would think that would probably be a win, considering how good Miami's defense is.
I think the most important part about Wednesday night is that it's Star Wars night in my FTX Arena.
Is that true?
Yes, I'm very looking forward to that. That should be fun. Yeah. So yeah, Star Wars night, a season high in points should be a good time for Heat fans. That's for sure.
Miles Turner showed up. So the Indiana Pacers did Star Wars night earlier this year. Miles Turner showed up in a full Darth Vader costume, complete with stormtroopers.
Ooh.
So which one of the Miami Heat players does that? Anything to that level?
No, I can't see any of them having that kind of.
Jimmy?
I just no, I just don't see it. PJ Tucker, but he would add like his own bling to it, being the fashionista that he is. I wonder.
You would have a pair of like Jordans on with it or something, which is fine. But I want to see somebody go all out for some. I disagree. I think somebody's going to go all out for Star Wars night, and it might be Jimmy Butler.
A couple seasons ago when they last had it, it was Myers Leonard who was big time into it. So I'm not sure if anybody on the team is that big a fan. I mean, Nikola Vucevic is the biggest Star Wars fan in the NBA. So I don't know. They should be playing Chicago if they're going to have Star Wars night. It should be anytime Chicago's in town with Vucevic.
I guess they didn't consult with you. You are the foremost expert on all things that are this stuff. So
the intersection. This is my worlds colliding, buddy.
Friday in Atlanta, the rare home game in this next couple of weeks. I think Tyler Herro goes off for another double-double. That's the prediction. I just think that that matchup is a real one. I think that his ability to take advantage of Atlanta's second unit, which is not a very good one, I think is a real thing. I see another big game for Tyler Herro Friday in Atlanta. Then Sunday against the Lakers. How about this for a prediction, David? Lakers, Miami Heat. What did you notice about the Miami Heat this last week? We didn't talk about this in our takeaway part. We talked about a lot of things on the court. What we didn't mention was that Miami celebrities coming back out for these Heat games. This is huge. We saw Big Joe there, I think, against Philadelphia. We saw Drake in attendance against Atlanta. We're seeing these celebrities come back out for a real contender. We got the Lakers in town on Sunday. I think Drake shows up again. I think we have a Drake sighting Sunday against the Lakers. I think we have multiple celebrities in that Sunday night game. I think that's going to be a huge game as far as just star power is concerned, not just because Jimmy and Bam are back and not just because LeBron is on the court, but because of who's sitting courtside. I'm very much looking forward to that game Sunday and all the people watching that we're going to be able to do.
I think you're probably right, but I think you're kind of ignoring conveniently the biggest factor in all that there's a nor'easter blowing through the United States right now that's freezing half of the country. So I think that's a big part of why you're going to see a lot more celebrities conveniently choosing to travel to Miami when the temperature
I think it's mostly
drops.
because of Caleb Martin and Bam Adebayo and those guys.
Fair point. I could see a strong argument for that. But anyway, we'll debate that in another show perhaps. But for now, we'll move on. And in our next segment, we'll talk a little bit about, what's going on with the Heat roster because they made some moves this past weekend and how it impacts the roster for the rest of the season. So we'll break that all down for you. But first, a little bit about one of our sponsors, Built Bar. It's the new year, so that means New Year's, new resolutions. If yours is about getting fit or just eating healthier, make sure you include Built Bar in your plan because it's the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, maybe even better than a candy bar. Built Bar makes it easier to stick to your resolution because it tastes so good, you'll want to eat it. 100% covered in chocolate, soft and easy to chew. You don't even know that you're eating a protein bar, but you're getting all the nutrients that you might be looking for to help power you through your New Year's resolutions. Again, most Built Bars contain about 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. So here's an idea for the new year. Go to all your secret treat stashes at home, in the pantry, at the office, and just throw it all out. Just replace it with Built Bars. Go to get built.com, and get a mixed box of all your favorite flavors. You can get a couple of each different flavor. Give some out to your coworkers, family, friends, whoever you want to. There's so many delicious flavors to choose from. It can help you as you get started in completing your New Year's resolutions. Go to built.com. Use the promo code LOCK15 and get 15% off your order. Use the promo code LOCK15 for 15% off, but only at built.com. And another one of our sponsors, BetOnline, would like to wish you a happy new betting year. As we continue our march to the playoffs and beyond, BetOnline remains the number one spot for all the best sports wagering action for 2022. New year and a new updated desktop and mobile website to help you sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use your promo code LOCKEDON to get started. From football, basketball, hockey to your favorite Vegas casino games, don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for 2022. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to wager in all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. And don't forget to use that promo code LOCKEDON. Thank you for making Locked On Heat your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Now podcast nightly recaps of every NBA game with analysis from our local experts. Listen to Locked On Now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or watch it on the Locked On NBA YouTube channel. Before we continue talking about the latest roster changes to the Miami Heat, I want to shout out a special listener, viewer of our podcast. This is, I want to shout out Miles. He was coming all the way from Maine to watch the Miami Heat take on the 76ers. Unfortunately, the Sixers wound up beating Miami, so Miles didn't get the victory he was hoping for, but he still said he had a great time. He was looking forward to meeting Wes and I, but neither of us were in attendance at that game. But you know what? It doesn't matter because Miles had a fantastic night, the craziest night of his life. He was given courtside club tickets so he could go to the club afterwards. He met Shaq, Shaquille O'Neal out there that night as well. They brought him on the court for a promotional marketing thing as well, and it was just an incredible experience for him. He mentioned how UD was so vocal on the bench, how fans around him were kind of trashing Duncan Robinson. But overall, even though the Heat weren't able to pull away with a victory, Miami still put on a hell of a show for Miles. So that's just wanted to shout him out. It was a great night for him, and I'm sure a lot of Heat fans that were in attendance. But that kind of leads me to my topic for Monday Madness, because you know what? I talked about this before, and I can continue to talk about it because right now it just seems like every loss, and Miami only has a few of them over the course of the season, despite injured players, despite losing players to COVID, despite all the different things that have impacted this Heat roster, they're still winning at a high level. They're still among the top 4 teams in the Eastern Conference, despite the fact that they have a talent disparity and everything else in comparison to the Milwaukee Bucks and the Brooklyn Nets, and they're still winning. And yet somebody's always looking for a scapegoat. On Saturday night, it was Duncan Robinson, who did struggle from the field. But you know what? Who cares? The Heat are winning. You know what? I think it's okay to be disappointed in Duncan's play of late, and at the same time also recognize that although he's struggling, he's also contributing at a high level in other ways. Yeah. He has a role in this team. He's not going anywhere. No trades were going to happen. You're not trading Dame Lillard for Duncan Robinson at this point, and Dame Lillard is going to be missing the rest of the season, so you don't want him anyway. You're not trading Bradley Beal for Duncan Robinson. You're not making that kind of a trade. As much as I'd like to see it just from a perspective of cementing Miami's title chances this season, Duncan Robinson is on this roster to stay at least for the rest of the year, and as such, as a Heat fan, you want to lend your support as much as possible. So I'll get off my soapbox and
I'm with you. Look, everybody shot poorly in that game, and for some reason, you've got a bunch of Heat fans being like, "Oh, Duncan Robinson is the reason we missed that game." And look, I understand that people are like, "Well, his looks were open. Those are the looks that he should have got." Like Jimmy Butler, the looks he got were a lot of them were contested. All that, whatever, man. Jimmy Butler makes those contested shots. That's why he's Jimmy Butler. Duncan Robinson makes those 3-pointers. That's why he's Duncan Robinson. You know what happened on Saturday? Jimmy Butler didn't make the shots he usually makes. Duncan Robinson didn't make the shots he usually makes. Kyle Lowry didn't make the shots he usually makes. Tyler Herro didn't make the shots. Max Strus didn't make the shot. Nobody made the shots that they usually make. Sometimes you just have a bad shooting night, and it doesn't mean you have to blame somebody. Sometimes you just chalk it up into a make or miss league where, hey, you know what? These are a bunch of misses tonight. I actually thought the Heat played really well in that game. Absolutely. Despite the misses. I thought they played really well. I thought they executed the game plan. And you listen to them after the game, you listen to Spo after the game, they would agree with that. And so I think 98% of the Monday Madness this season has been Duncan Robinson related because people are just so. I actually thought Spo had a really interesting comment after Saturday night is that the misses for Duncan Robinson are just going to be a little bit louder, right? Because the nature of what a 3-point shot is, because there's so much anticipation every time that shot goes up. And when it goes down, you don't get to do the big cheer and the big celebration. And so every miss from Duncan Robinson just seems a little bit bigger than a miss from Jimmy Butler in the mid-range or Omer Yurtseven at the basket or whatever it might be. And I think because of that, there's a lot of blame. And combined with the contract, obviously, it's easy to put blame on Duncan Robinson. But he was not the reason Miami lost that game Saturday night. And prior to that, this little mini slump that he's had over the last few games, he was shooting 43% in the 15 games prior. He's been completely out of this slump. But as a 3-point shooter, you're going to have slumps. It's just going to happen. But also as a 3-point shooter, you're going to shoot over 40% for a very long stretch of games. And what Duncan Robinson was able to do during that big stretch was as much of a reason why Miami is in their position that they are in now, second place in the Eastern Conference, and be able to win without Jimmy and Bam for a big chunk of those games. That was just as big of a reason that they were able to do that as Max Strus, Gabe Vincent, Caleb Martin, Omer Yurtseven, whoever you want to name. Caleb Martin or Duncan Robinson was huge in those games. And so, people need to give him credit when it's deserved and be a little easier on him when he has an off shooting night because it happens to everybody.
Well, let's wrap up our show here, and then we'll talk a little bit about what's going on with the roster. Marcus Garrett, unfortunately, waived by the Miami Heat as he continued to nurse a wrist injury that's taken him out for several weeks now. I don't think he's played at all this year. I think the last time he played was sometime in December. I can't recall exactly when it was, but he was constantly on the injury report. Didn't seem like he was getting better. He had season-ending surgery, and so he's been waived by the team, but he'll continue to be able to rehab with the team. And hopefully he'll bounce back at some point with Miami Heat or another team as he tries to latch on and grow his NBA career. But in the meantime, Kyle Guy, who we had on the show last week for an interview, was offered a 2-way contract, so he's part of the team right now. I think that's the right move, right? I think Kyle Guy continues to show that he's capable as an offensive player, that he's willing to put in the work, etc. There's some familiarity there. There's a strong work ethic. There's a connection to Tyler Herro, what have you. I think it's the right move. I'm not sure how much he'll get playing time moving forward. He didn't play on Saturday versus the Philadelphia 76ers, nor did Gabe Vincent, but I think it's the right move. What do you think?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, look, you're at a point now, the Heat were always high on Marcus Garrett, especially with his defensive potential and what he could do on that end with his length and his activity and all this stuff. But once you have season-ending surgery, I mean, that's it. You know, he's not going to play for you, so it makes sense to go ahead and waive him. Unfortunately, that's the nature of the NBA. And so I think Marcus Garrett ends up, I would guess, I have no reporting behind this, I would guess because of how high Miami is on him, probably ends up in Sioux Falls or something, and maybe he rehabs with them at the end of the year, whatever. But they'll keep their eyes on him, right? I don't think his time associated with the organization is over, but for now it is. And it makes sense to pick up a guy in Kyle Guy who was just flat out productive for you, right? Like no need to overthink this about ceiling or needs or whatever. When you're talking about these 2-way contracts, you want a guy that could just be productive. That's what they did with Caleb Martin. Turns out he's super productive and is getting his way into the Hammer lineup. Well, Kyle Guy, I don't think it'll be that. I don't think he'll have a nightly rotation role. I don't think fans should expect that whatsoever. But if there is an injury to a guy like Tyler Herro or Duncan Robinson or Max Strus or somebody like that, or Gabe Vincent, you can see Kyle Guy getting some minutes in those situations, which is, again, you want a guy who you trust in those moments when you need him every once in a while in a pinch. And I think Eric Spoelstra does with Kyle Guy. So it makes sense. That's the right pickup for them.
Absolutely. And I think, given what we've seen from Miami this season and consistently throughout the franchise's history, they're going to find a way to develop. He's going to improve here. Maybe he could go with a team where he could get more of an opportunity if they're tanking or losing significantly. That seems unlikely too. You just don't pluck somebody who wasn't playing in the league and just all of a sudden thrust him into your starting lineup. So for him as an individual, he gets a chance to continue to grow here in Miami. He gets to continue to establish himself. He can earn spot minutes here and there. And as long as he understands his role, as he's shown that he is capable of understanding it, then he's going to find a way to thrive here. So good luck to him and the Miami Heat, of course, as always. But thank you so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Remember that every show is always free and available wherever you get it. So make sure to subscribe to get the best coverage available. Make sure to also check out Locked On Bets, your daily one-stop shop for all of your gambling needs. This is David Ramil signing off somewhere out there in Hawaii. Wes, thank you so much for joining me.
Wrap it up, E.